I will now offer the podium to the distinguished and very good friend and colleague from the great state of Arkansas, where it's hard to pick your favorite member of the Arkansas delegation. So I won't do that now. But he'd be in my top 4. Mr. Frenchhill, thank you. And I yield you so much time as you may consume.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Utah. And just for those 2 people that are listening at home, there are only 4 members of the Arkansas delegation, so that was an easy comment from my good friend from Utah, who's doing an outstanding job helping lead our conference and lead our conference messaging on this House floor and in our home districts as we draw a distinction between what House Republicans would be doing if we were able to be guiding the executive branch or have both houses here in Congress and the failures of the Biden administration. So I thank my friend from Utah. And I want to address a couple of issues I think that are key, that are confronting the American people and that we're touching on this week in the House. Mr. Speaker, the United States went from importing liquefied natural gas just 15 years ago to now being the world's largest exporter. That's a powerful testament to America's technological advance and our ability to harness this clean, abundant, affordable source of baseload power for our own use and for the ability to export it. President Biden's recent decision to halt the exploration of American liquefied natural gas is not in the interest of the American worker, the American economy, our allies' national security, or the globe's goal of a clean energy transition. This is just another President Joe Biden poor decision in a long line of other failed energy policies since he took office in January 2021. As noted by my good friend from California, shutting down on day one the Keystone XL pipeline, denying new permits, discouraging new drilling, discouraging new pipelines, and coercing banks and securities firms across this country to discourage badly needed loans and capital investments in the energy industry by way of environmental social governance, so-called ESG policies. These reckless decisions have weakened our global leadership and weakened America's energy independence. And while President Biden's nanny state regulators consider going full California on the whole nation by banning your gas stove, Republicans support an all-the-above approach to our energy needs and our long-run energy transition. Republicans believe that we need to tap into Americans' abundance of natural resources that are crucial to enhancing our own energy security and our own energy independence. The United States stands ready to export more LNG to Europe, but pipelines and other needed infrastructure are not adequate in this country in order to advance more assistance in the short run. In my view, Mr. Speaker, upstream and downstream infrastructure investments in natural gas are not stranded assets, which is typically the argument made by the opposition. According to a recent U.S. Energy Information Administration International Energy Outlook, by 2050, global energy use will increase nearly 50% compared to today. Now, let that sink in. 50% greater than today in just 25 years. And although the primary energy consumption sources of renewables is expected to grow from 15% today to 27% by 2050, still 80% of consumption will need to come from coal, oil, natural gas, and nuclear. Clearly, based on global power demands and despite new renewable sources, this globe, this nation needs decades of liquefied natural gas access and natural gas in our reserves. We need to invest and create that infrastructure leading to our own development and crucial export development, which will, if we export, add $73 billion, it's estimated, to our U.S. economy over the next 15 years, bolstering energy trade, stimulating domestic production, while assisting friends and allies abroad. Increasing U.S. liquefied natural gas export will benefit our allies, as I note, in Europe and in Asia by adding the U.S. as a reliable source of energy on the global market, offsetting the risk that's being dominated by one supplier, like in the case of Germany being completely dependent on natural gas from Russia at the time of Russia's invasion to Ukraine, or countries being caught in a supply crisis due to war in the Persian Gulf, or war or shipping challenges in the Red Sea. Just last year, Mr. Speaker, about 13% of Europe's natural gas went through the Red Sea, that now is impacted by the Houthis in Yemen attacking shipping of all flag vessels trying to go up the Red Sea through the Suez Canal to service Europe. We have natural gas fields across our nation in Pennsylvania, New York, that rival, may even be more abundant than those in the Middle East. Yet we will never see, in my view, Mr. Speaker, a new pipeline built from Pennsylvania over to the East Coast ports under this administration or under future Democratic leadership. And I don't think we'll see new jobs or development of New York's massive, abundant natural gas in the Marcellus Shale under Democratic governors. Again, these kinds of policy officials and Biden officials have doubled down, tripled down on policies that not only raise costs for everyday American families, but do nothing in the long run to impact the climate. Likewise, aid to American technology exports, the Biden administration should work to ensure that international financial institutions like the World Bank or the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development will finance natural gas projects and nuclear power as a part of the energy transition. Right now, they're very reluctant to do that. And in the case of the EBRD, will not finance nuclear. Now think about that. And certainly won't finance natural gas. The EBRD has been insisting on financing renewable green energy projects only to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet ignores an all-of-the-above energy strategy. International financial institutions like the EBRD should finance beyond nuclear and include sources of energy like liquefied natural gas to improve access and diversification, particularly in Europe, their energy backbone, their energy sources. It's in their best interest to do that. Energy policy is a long-term investment in the needs of the globe's future, both at home and abroad. And as more and more countries grow and develop and their people become wealthier and their incomes rise, their energy consumption will increase as well. We cannot wait and have nothing to offer, and certainly cannot impose the Biden administration's energy policies on the world and expect a good outcome, or rising wages or incomes. We should be investing in all of our energy options, like oil, nuclear, renewables, and natural gas, not only our ability to export and remain energy dominant worldwide, but to benefit the entire economy of the globe. President Biden's mistakes and failed policies today will lead us to not having the energy capacity that we need for tomorrow, and he will be making the transition to a clean energy future even harder and more costly for our families. Mr. Speaker, this week the Senate completed work on funding for military assistance for Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel, all critical partner countries to the United States. Each a nation where we have a national security interest in seeing their security needs met, benefiting our economy, benefiting our jobs, benefiting our global reach across the globe. And as Americans, this should feel very natural to us that we partner with other nations to help a nation fight for freedom. Why? Well, Mr. Speaker, as Americans, we are all versed in our own founding, our own struggles with the American Revolution. We recall the lack of food, the lack of pay, the lack of socks and shoes, the misery of the winter at Valley Forge. Every school child in this nation knows about Washington on his knees at Valley Forge. What we must remember is that we did not win our independence alone. From 1775 to 1781, the United States would not have seen victory at Yorktown, ending the American Revolution in victory were it not for allied nations making a bet on the grit, on the tenacity of colonial Americans, taking on the world's largest navy and the world's largest army. France, the bankers in Amsterdam, the Spanish, all opposed Great Britain's empire and backed General Washington's struggling ragtag army. 80% of the muskets and uniforms worn by the colonial army were supplied by France. The French and the Dutch supplied loans and cash. Spanish gunpowder and the French Navy were critical to our victory. Without this help and the other nations, we would not have had the resources to win the American Revolution or become the independent, democratic, dynamic country 250 years later. As Americans, we understand that sense of partnership that it takes when you're fighting for freedom. And this week, once again, I traveled across the Atlantic to meet with President Zelensky in Ukraine, joining a CODEL led by Mike Turner, the chairman of our Intelligence Committee, to assess what is Europe doing? What's the Ukraine strategy? How are American investments audited and protected and transparent? What are our options there to make sure that Putin is not successful in Ukraine? Well, I'll read something on their internet, Mr. Speaker. Let's go investigate it for ourselves. Let's look at Zelensky and his generals in the eye. Let's look at American advisors in Germany and in Poland in the eye and ask them, should Putin be allowed to win in Ukraine? The answer, Mr. Speaker, is clearly no. Along with dozens of allied nations, the United States should continue to back the freedom-fighting, freedom-loving Ukrainians to ensure that Vladimir Putin knows he's not going to stay in Ukraine. Let me be clear, he will be denied that opportunity. Now, Mr. Speaker, in polling, the American people are clear. They do not want Putin victorious in Ukraine. It's bad for Europe, the sovereignty of Ukraine, and for the world. May I ask the Speaker how much time remains?
20 seconds.
I thank the gentleman. So let me be clear that we need to complete our work effectively on this House and find that sense of partnership, that we find the right funding, the right balance of auditing and talent necessary to back the Ukrainian success in defeating Putin. And with that, I yield back to my friend from Utah.